So, when you hear the name Mozart, what comes to mind? Probably powdered wigs, right? Maybe this idea of a divine, almost angelic talent. But what if I told you the real story is, well, it's a lot more dramatic. It's the story of a rebel.
See, we all know the legend of the child prodigy, the wonderkind, but that whole myth kind of hides the tough, ambitious, and honestly defiant man who completely tore up the rulebook. He basically became one of the first great freelance artists in history. So, yeah, let's peel back those layers.
Okay, first things first, we have to start with the image that everybody knows. The legend, The divine child, touched by genius from the moment he was born.
And look, the facts are just staggering. He was born in Salzburg in 1756, and by age five, he was composing little minuets that his dad, Leopold, was carefully writing down. By 6, he and his sister Nannerl were already on the road, performing for kings and queens all over Europe. It's the stuff of legend for a reason. But it is not the whole story.
Because what looked like some glamorous tour was actually one of the most intense, grueling musical apprenticeships you can possibly imagine. This is where the prodigy was really forged into a master.
Just take a look at this itinerary for a second. This wasn't a trip. It was a 3.5-year odyssey. Can you imagine being a little kid, whisked from courts in Germany to the sheer opulence of Versailles, then hopping across the channel to London, and then over to the Netherlands? This was Mozart's classroom. And the lessons? Well, they were relentless.
Yeah, this was no holiday. His father was strategically exposing him to everything. He was hearing the fire of Italian opera in London, the grand French style in Paris. He even met masters like Johann Christian Bach. He was like a musical sponge, just absorbing and then synthesizing every single style he came across.
And the result of all this intense education? Well, while he was in London, at just 8 years old, he composed his first symphony. Not some simple tune, a full symphony. His genius was totally undeniable, but it was being forged in the fire of constant travel, performance, and observation. So after being shaped by these grand courts of Europe, you can imagine that coming back to a small provincial court in Salzburg, it was like putting a genius in a cage, and that cage was about to break.
Back home, he was a court musician, which basically meant he was a servant with a special skill. And his boss, the Archbishop, was a really rigid guy who just didn't get Mozart's ambition or his worldly experience. Mozart felt like his talent was being completely wasted, his freedom totally restricted. The tension just built and built, until it finally exploded in 1781.
And this is how it ended. Not with a polite resignation letter. Nope. Mozart demanded to be released from his service, and the Archbishop's steward, a guy named Count Arco, literally kicked him out the door. It was humiliating, it was shocking, but for Mozart, it was the kick that launched him into freedom.
And that freedom led him straight to Vienna, the musical capital of the world. This is where he would gamble everything on his own talent, becoming a freelance artist in an age that was all about patronage. And he would discover both the incredible glory and the serious peril of that choice.
Once he was free from the Archbishop, Mozart's creativity just detonated. He wasn't writing on command anymore. He was writing for the public, for himself, and for history. Vienna was where he composed the masterpieces that would change music forever.
I mean, think about it. The Marriage of Figaro was a politically charged comedy that championed servants over their masters, an idea so radical it was almost banned. Then you've got Don Giovanni, this dark, psychologically complex opera that just shattered conventions by mixing tragedy and comedy. And finally, The Magic Flute, a fairy tale for the people, filled with symbolism and music of just sublime beauty. In just a few years, he completely revolutionized what opera could be.
But here's the massive paradox of his life in Vienna. On one hand, you've got this incredible artistic triumph. He was famous, he was celebrated, a total star. But on the other hand, financial chaos. Without a steady paycheck from a patron, his income was all over the place. He earned huge sums of money, but he spent even more. And that led to this constant, desperate struggle with debt.
And this is the heartbreaking reality behind all that sublime music. He wrote dozens of letters just like this one to his friend Michael Pushberg, pleading for loans just to keep his family afloat. So the crucial thing to get is that the very same freedom that let him write Don Giovanni also left him in a state of constant financial anxiety.
So what does this incredible, complicated life leave us with? I mean, what can we actually learn from this genius who just refused to be a servant?
Even at the very end, his pace was just relentless.
In his final year, while he was battling illness and drowning in debt, he produced 2 more masterpieces, the Magic Flute and La Clemenza di Tito, and started his haunting, unfinished Requiem. He died at just 35, leaving behind a legacy that is, well, it's immeasurable.
So what are the takeaways for us? I think it's about the courage it takes to bet on yourself. It's the lesson that genius isn't just one thing, but it's this fusion of everything you learn, like its grand tour. It's the reality that talent means absolutely nothing without a ferocious work ethic. And maybe most important of all, that true mastery is never just a gift. It's forged in struggle.
And I want to leave you with his own words, written right after he broke free. This is the voice of the rebel. He's proud, defiant, and completely aware of his own worth, challenging the world to recognize it. He knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? For the freedom to create art that is literally immortal, Mozart paid with a life of instability and struggle. And that leaves us with this huge question about art and commerce and creativity. What really is the true price of genius?